In this decade of action to achieve sustainable development goals, we have instead confronted a series of disasters: the COVID pandemic, economic recession, spiraling prices, and the escalating impacts of climate change. These have reversed global growth and, for the first time in 30 years, increased poverty and hunger. Meanwhile, with rising great power rivalries, political dialogue has frequently frozen, and often this Security Council has been paralyzed. Old conflicts have festered and new conflicts have emerged, eroding the edifice of the world order established 76 years ago by the principles of the UN Charter. It is indeed the United Nations which has been founded for this very purpose: to resolve conflicts, to end wars, to make peace, to battle hunger, poverty, and desperation. 80% of the 800 million undernourished and the 40 million facing famine inhabit countries riven by conflict or emerging from conflict. Just yesterday, we participated in the ministerial meeting on global food security, Call to Action. This initiative will go a long way in addressing the immediate crises of food security, and the leadership behind such humanitarian efforts must be appreciated. The call to action will help ramping up food production, help keep supply chains open, and address blockages, mobilize financial and agricultural resources to where they are needed, help poor farmers expand local production, and much more. Pakistan looks forward to playing its part, its active part, in this bold call to action. We also look to the United Nations to provide the leadership to address the root causes of food insecurity and conflict. Mr. President, the people of Ukraine go hungry due to the ongoing conflict. 95% of the people of Afghanistan are under the threat of poverty as a direct result of conflict. The people of occupied territories in Palestine and Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir are constantly imprisoned by perpetual conflict. They are arbitrarily and inhumanely suffering from immense misery, including hunger. Kashmir has become a symbol of the dysfunction of this institution and this council. The actions of the 5th of August 2019 and the 5th of May 2022 by India in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is not only an assault on the people of Kashmir, but it is an assault on the United Nations, it is an assault on the Security Council and its resolutions, and the 4th Geneva Convention. The inaction of this body as the internationally recognized disputed status of the region is undermined, the inaction of this forum while the Muslim majority of Kashmir are being turned into a minority in their own land, in their own home, leads the youth of Kashmir to question that who will resolve this conflict, who will deliver the peace they were promised. We challenge those that worry about food security. Resolve the Kashmir dispute. Open the doors to peace in South Asia. And watch how the farmers of Pakistan and India can feed the world. Even those not directly involved in a conflict pay the price of war. The conflict in Ukraine means that many across the world will become food insecure and risk going hungry. Pakistan relied heavily on wheat and fertilizer from the region. Our farmers are suffering, and so are our people. The price of such conflicts is paid at the petrol pump and at the grocery store. For everyone who finds it difficult to make ends meet, things just got a lot more difficult. We're in the middle of the most deadly pandemic of our time. Millions have died. People continue to die. The health and economic toll of this pandemic will outlast the pandemic itself. Our continents are sinking. Our planet is under threat. Is it not the time to rise above the conflicts of man and face the threats to humanity? Mr. President, they say history repeats itself, first as a tragedy and then as a farce. They say that when the new wars end, old wars return. At the end of the last Cold War, we saw the beginning of what was to become the new war. Afghanistan was abandoned, and out of the wreckage emerged the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, extremism, and terrorism. Today, Afghanistan runs the risk of being abandoned yet again, and we find ourselves at the precipice of what many fear can be a new era of great power conflict. Pakistan has seen the costs of war up close. We are exhausted by conflict. We just witnessed how after decades of conflict, ultimately dialogue and diplomacy were the path to a conclusion. From our own experience, we most humbly and respectfully appeal to you to deploy dialogue and diplomacy in the pursuit of peace before and not after the next great war. Save another generation of humanity from the misery of conflict. Then watch as a new generation unlocks its true potential. We can rise to the challenges of our time. We can be the generation that ends hunger. We can be the generation that saves our planet. We can be the generation that breaks this cycle, if you allow us. Thank you, Mr. President. Measures to mitigate the effects and impacts of climate change, to preserve the use of water, to move away from flood irrigation and other such outdated techniques, to increase our water infrastructure and incentivize our farmers for domestic production. I actually believe Pakistani farmers can meet not only our domestic needs for wheat, but also could provide that wheat to the world if they were encouraged and supported in the right way, and if governments work to reduce their input costs at a time of high inflation, we could really we could do our own bit to support food security challenges and issues. As far as my interaction with foreign ministers over here, we've really focused on enhancing trade relations. My party and myself and the new unity government believe in that our sort of foreign policy motto is trade over aid, and that is exactly what we're emphasizing on.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I'm not Edie, but she'll come around. Pamela Falk from CBS News. You have spoken, even since you've been here, about the fight against extremism. Mm-hmm. I've spoken with both of your ambassadors about this issue. Can you explain, or at least update us, on where terrorism and Pakistan stands? I know it's a very big question, but it was a big issue this past summer. What do you see now in terms of the scenario?
As far as terrorism and extremism is concerned, this is a consistent and long-term existential threat to all of us. There are obviously immediate concerns that need to be addressed, whether vis-a-vis specific terrorist groups, their increased activity, how and to which way they benefit from the situation in Afghanistan. But as far as our country's long-term approach is concerned, that needs a lot of political ownership and consensus and investment in across the board, where we not only fight this the sort of militant component, the kinetic component of this conflict, but we also the ideological component, and we fight the narrative component. Pakistan has a national action plan that is all-encompassing. It combats hate speech, it combats extremism, it combats this thought, this ideology, this poisonous and toxic ideology, and has a way forward to deal with specific groups. Unfortunately, despite having this plan being born of consensus, it hasn't been owned and implemented in the way it should have been by the previous government, and I would certainly emphasize on the new government, of which I am a part, that we fully own the National Action Plan and implement it, walk the walk, walk the walk that we talk about to ensure the safety not only of future generations in Pakistan, but also in the international world.
Thank you so much.
Michelle?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Policy between the previous administration and now we do of course have a more nuanced foreign policy, but as far as this particular issue is concerned, Pakistan is in favor of peace. We, from our own perspective and our own experience, have just seen how after decades of conflict in Afghanistan, how ultimately dialogue and diplomacy were the path to a conclusion. And our case before the world, made it today at the UN Security Council, is just that, is to learn from our experience and deploy the tools of dialogue and diplomacy now to help pursue a peaceful resolution for this conflict. We believe that this and other conflicts around the world serve to exacerbate issues, distract us from existential threats like climate change or even a global pandemic, which we are experiencing at the moment. It's not over. So that is our sort of our primary message. Pakistan, despite having limited resources, has done whatever it can within a humanitarian crisis, within a humanitarian context. We have been leaders in advocating for humanitarian aid in Afghanistan and chipping in our part over there. We've also, despite our limited resources, been providing humanitarian assistance to the people of Ukraine. So while our foreign policy is more nuanced, there's no sea change in our approach. Your second question was more... Oh, okay, so on the bilateral engagement with everyone, and consistent engagement is important regardless of events and ground realities. And it's only if we have consistent engagements that we can deal with the multitude of problems that we do face. I'm particularly pleased with the way that the engagements that we have had on the sidelines of this of the United Nations have gone so far. I believe Pakistan and the United States have a long history. We have a deep, meaningful relationship that has a people-to-people side, a government-to-government side, a business-to-business side, but there's a lot more potential to unlock over there. And we would like to pivot away from a transactory relationship, a one-point agenda relationship, to a more broad-based relationship with a particular emphasis on trade, with a particular, and I'm particularly pleased with my conversations with Secretary of State Blinken on enhancing trade in the agriculture sector, in the energy sector, in the tech and IT sector, on the U.S. administration's initiatives on women empowerment, empowering women entrepreneurs, and I look forward to working with the U.S. government in these fields to provide opportunities for Pakistani business and for American entrepreneurs, because I believe that they hold the key to unlocking the true potential of our bilateral relationship. India is concerned. That's particularly complicated by their recent illegal, unilateral measures in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Firstly, the actions of August 5th, 2019, and more recently, the events of May 5th, 2022, have complicated this matter. These unilateral actions not only seek to undermine the internationally recognized disputed status of the region. We see these as an assault not only on the people of Kashmir, but an assault on this institution of the United Nations, as an assault on the UN Security Council and its resolution, as an assault on the Geneva Convention. Not only are they undermining the international disputed status of the region, but there's a concrete effort to undermine and disenfranchise and disempower the Muslim minority, a Muslim majority of the region. They've illegally allowed for non-Kashmiris to buy property and become residents of Kashmir and dilute the organic population. And more recently, through the May 5th so-called Delimitation Commission, the electoral constituencies of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir have been gerrymandered to artificially inflate the non-Muslim minority and convert the Muslim majority into a minority minority. So such actions make it very difficult for us to hold a dialogue with the country who is implementing racist policy in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and are not abiding by the resolutions of the United Nations and international norms and international rules-based order. And this, having said that, we are very cognizant of the fact that economic activity, dialogue, diplomacy are ultimately the ways and means for countries to engage with each other and resolve disputes. I just note that particularly at the moment, given this aggressive, hostile behavior, the practical space for that happening is very limited. And while I wouldn't call it a reset, I would say it is a great opportunity for both sides to think about what is in the benefit of our people, what is in the benefit of the people of America, and what is to the benefit of the people of Pakistan. If we sort of close all doors between the two countries and stop talking to one another, I don't believe that serves the interests of Pakistan, and I don't believe that serves the interests of the people of America. There's definitely a newfound opportunity to enhance engagement, to move beyond a transactional relationship to a more deep and meaningful relationship. And I certainly see the space for that. I certainly see the window for that. And if only we continue to have an honest and meaningful dialogue with one another, Pakistan is very committed to working with the international community. We want to, we are a modern Muslim nation that will be taken seriously on the world stage. We will conduct ourselves in a responsible manner and in an honest manner, engage with everyone, be friends to all and enemies to none, and hope to work towards the mutual benefit of our two countries. Issue of refugees and migration is a sort of a hot button topic in countries across the world. Particularly given the events in Afghanistan, it is most certainly a fear for us and all neighboring countries. We do fear the possibility of the floodgates opening to massive a refugee crisis like we've seen in the past. As the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan worsens, as the economic situation in Afghanistan worsens, the threat and likelihood of this happening increases. That is why Pakistan is very keen that we don't send a message to the people of Afghanistan yet again that after decades of conflict that they are abandoned by the international community. Pakistan is working particularly hard to assist in the humanitarian crisis and encourage the international community to engage with Afghanistan and engage with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, to stop a total collapse of the Afghan economy. Because surely if 95% of the people of Afghanistan are under threat of poverty, of going below the poverty line, that not only has consequences for Afghanistan, but it has consequences for Pakistan and indeed the rest of the world, one of those manifestations would be in the form of refugees and migrants.
Can I have a follow-up, please?
Convey to the new regime in Afghanistan that they live up to their international commitments. Now, whether that is their international commitment to the right to girls' education and allowing the women's rights in Afghanistan within that context, or it's their international commitment to not allow their soil to be used for terrorist activity, or it's their international commitment to form a more inclusive government setup. In our private conversations and in our public conversations, we do insist on these points. As far as the specific question of women's rights are concerned, the previous government may have had its own approach, but as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, I believe when I emphasize the importance of women empowerment, the importance of women's rights, that is not within some sort of